everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I want to talk about my experience at Folsom Street Fair. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel, hi, hello. You might not be aware, but I did a video last year where I also talked about my experience at Folsom. And in today's video, I am going to be doing a little bit of a comparison between those two. So if you haven't seen my original one, I do recommend you watch that as well, because that's going to give you the full context for everything I'm going to be discussing in today's video. And as well, I also want to start off by doing a little bit of a history lesson about Folsom. Now, this is going to be the Reader's Digest version of this, so if you want like the actual full historical context, link to some other resources will also be down in the description box, so you can read and watch those resources to get a complete history of everything. Because as it turns out, it wasn't as simple as people being like, oh hey, you know, it'd be great, let's do a big old BDSM fair in San Francisco and let's all get naked and hit each other in public. Sounds like a great time. Like, it was not that simple. It evolved out of other things that were already happening in San Francisco, and over time it evolved, it changed into what we know it as today. So, going back to the beginning of that history, the location of Folsom Street Fair is Folsom Street, which is in the Soma, south of Market District in San Francisco. And the reason why all of this originated there is traditionally that was a part of San Francisco that had a lot of poor and working class people, and also had a lot of gay men who had been discharged from the military who ended up in San Francisco because that was where the boats dropped them off. So you had a community that consisted of a lot of marginalized people who were all mixing together and forming their own community. The city of San Francisco, though, didn't exactly see it that way. They looked at the area and went, oh geez, look at all this. Looks like we need to revitalize some stuff. Why don't we come up with the new plan for everything that's going to be in this area, and we're going to get rid of all the affordable housing, and it's going to be so great, and it's going to be so much better than it currently is right now for us. And the people who live there were like, hey, we want to be able to keep living here, so why don't we organize? Because as it turns out, there were a lot of people who lived there that were former union organizers, and they were like, hey, why don't we show everybody how great where we live is? Why don't we come up with a fair so we can raise awareness and we can show everybody how diverse our community is? Now, part of that was definitely representation and support for the LGBT plus community, who at this time in 1984 were definitely starting to go through some issues, shall we say, which we'll talk about in a minute. And as part of that, there were also some aspects of it that were kink related, simply because there is that overlap between the gay men's community and kink, and just all of that kind of gets mushed up together, at least at the very beginning. It's not something where it is clearly about kink and gay men or anything like that. It's more tangential to the overall desire to have the community not basically be destroyed by the city of San Francisco for a revitalization project. Now, over time, that focus shifted though, because, as I mentioned, 1980s, when this was happening, AIDS epidemic. And the focus of it shifted to more of a fundraising effort specifically for the AIDS epidemic and wanting to raise awareness about that and support members of their community. With that, obviously, you have more of an overt introduction of the kink community, because one of the aspects of the LGBT plus community that was really, really active in fighting AIDS were the leather folk. And so because of that connection, they become more and more prominent in the event as well, until in 1996, you have the first overt reference in an advertisement of Folsom. They're like, hey, this is like a leather sex thing, this is a BDSM thing, look at this. That was basically the first time you saw it super overtly, was in that advertisement. And from there and into today, you see more and more of a connotation between the event and kink specifically, as opposed to maybe what it was originally. And especially at first, it was very much a gay men's thing, and over time it became more of a general LGBT plus thing, and then over time it became also something that included members of the heterosexual community, until where you have it today, where it's basically a giant fair for anybody who's interested in kink, and there's also a lot of people that go there that have no connection to kink whatsoever. So that is the super quick 3.5 minute long Reader's Digest version of the history of Folsom. If I left anything out, if I've gotten anything wrong, please double check me. Read the sources down in the description box below because that is going to give you the full picture. Now, exactly what Folsom is today is a kinky street fair. What that means is there's definitely still a fundraising aspect to it. There is a lot of fundraising for various causes, but definitely most prominently AIDS and HIV, but also for other causes as well. You also have a lot of vendors that go there that sell kink goods. You have shows, you have pony play meetups, you have drag queens, you have all sorts of interconnected parties because now it's morphed into not just the fair by itself, but also basically an entire Soma festival where there's lots of different events that are kink related all in the area at the same time. There's different parties and gatherings, there's classes, there's things at Wicked Grounds, there's even events just in the general area of California, like for example, Vox Body Studios had a big rope thing because it turns out that a lot of people traveling in the area also wanted to do rope at the same time as they were visiting in town for Folsom Street Fair, and it is huge. I believe over 250,000 people are estimated to go annually, so it is the biggest public kink event that happens in the United States. If you're on the East Coast, there is also Folsom East, which is in New York. I believe there's also a Folsom Berlin, and if you're located in Canada, the most similar events would probably be the festivals that happen in, I want to say, Vancouver and Montreal, possibly Toronto, the big fetish weekend events that happen there during the summertime. Those are somewhat close, and basically it's a big way to be out and be proud and be kinky in public. That could be as simple as wearing your collar out in public for the first time. There are people who are totally naked. There are people that do scenes. There are people that do kink performances like rope bondage and cupping and all sorts of wonderful, amazing things. There are so many things that have happened at Folsom over the years, and you may notice, because there are actually a lot of pictures of Folsom. There are a lot of pictures of Folsom. I literally go Google Folsom, you will see there are a lot of pictures. I can't really show them on YouTube though. One of the main things that I was asked about when I went on this trip was like, oh, are you gonna take videos? Are you gonna take photos? And the answer to that is no, because there are a lot of naked people there. Because of the fact that it is an open kink event that allows nudity and play and genitalia and basically anything you could think of, really, that would be in the bounds of general legality in terms of, like, you know, not murdering people and not cutting off their limbs. It is a big event. We're going to see a lot of different things. That includes a lot of people's private parts, a lot of people doing sexual things, a lot of people doing things that would just generally not be safe for YouTube. So, cannot really show you guys that myself because I don't trust my technology to be able to blur out that much possible background genitalia. It's just, there's too much risk associated with that. And not even with just the is it safe for YouTube aspect of things, but also in terms of the privacy of the people attending. Because there is kind of a weird thing about Folsom where it is public, but there's also still somewhat of a desire for anonymity at the same time, because it is a way of associating yourself with kink. So you may feel comfortable like going to the event, but you might not want photos taken of you. You might not want to be in a YouTube video that's going to get I don't even know how many views. And I respect that. But consent is a very important part of the BDSM community, and if I cannot get the consent of the people who are in the photos I use that are in the background of video that I have, I'm not gonna do that. That doesn't feel right to me. That feels kind of icky. I just don't want to be part of that. And one of the things that I experienced when I was at Folsom last year was that people were very proactive with asking for pictures. You know, every single time, at least that I could see, where somebody wanted to take a photo, they would ask first, like, hey, can I take a photo with you? Can I take a photo of you? Are you okay being the background of this? It was very proactive, and I very much appreciated that. And I'm going to get into this later. That was not necessarily my experience this year, which was kind of disappointing. But I also want to give you guys a full picture of everything that I did that weekend, just a little snapshot so you guys have an idea of some things that you could do while you're there for the weekend. So when we went, we decided to make it a long weekend trip because Folsom itself is actually on Sunday, and it's from 11 to 6. So if you're traveling from outside of the state, it makes sense to make a weekend of it. So we flew in and we had all day on Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday as well, to basically get up to whatever we felt like doing. We got in kind of early in the morning on Saturday, so we had a lot of time where we could do a lot of things in San Francisco, kink related or not. And this year we definitely opted for more of a relaxing vacation, something that wasn't necessarily as kink oriented, because something that I kind of learned from going to Folsom last year is I love being around my kinky people. I love getting to experience all of that, but my goodness, does it take a lot of energy to be around 250,000 people. So rather than burning myself out going to every single pre-party and after party and munch and class and every little thing I could go to that would involve a lot of socialization with the most number of kinky people every year that are probably in San Francisco, I decided like, okay, let's not do that maybe. Let's do something a little bit more private. So instead we focused on just kind of enjoying the city. One thing that we went to go see was Berber, which is actually a restaurant and like Moroccan themed dinner party event that is up north of the Soma district. I cannot remember exactly what that district is called, but it was really cool because basically it is a sit-down restaurant where you go and it's a big like burlesque night event where you get served a pre-fee meal where you have every meal brought out to you. And we got to see a contortionist perform, and we got to see a hoop or a lyra performance. We also got to see some belly dancing performances. There was singing. It was really, really cool, and I think it was like $85 a person, somewhere in there. And for like 2.5 hours of entertainment and like a 6-course meal, it was pretty affordable, and I recommend checking it out because it was also something that I found was very like kink and queer friendly. Like 2 of the performers were men, and traditionally, at least in burlesque performances that I've been to, there's no way that you would have a solo male performer. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I just overall enjoyed the environment, and it was something that I enjoyed that wasn't kink related. As well, during this weekend, we did also make sure to stop by Wicked Grounds and Mr. S Leather. So Wicked Grounds is actually a coffee shop that is run by kink people and basically run off of donations from the kink community. It's a place where you can go and you can get milkshakes and coffee and sandwiches and tea and just have a little bit of a respite in the middle of the day and sit down and browse some kink wares and have a good conversation with people. It's a great place if you're doing a negotiation or you're meeting up with somebody to have a casual conversation in a kink place. They do also allow you to do like casual public play. So if that's something that you've been kind of wanting to explore a little bit, Wicked Grounds could be a good place for that. And overall, it's super cute. It's very close to the actual event itself. So if you're anywhere near Folsom Street, it's worth checking out. Now, Mr. S Leather is something I've mentioned so many times on my channel. It's like the big premier leather and gay men's store. Now, it's not just for gay men, although their women's selection is very limited. It also just has something for everybody. If you're into pet play, if you're into butt plugs, if you're into penetration of any kind, if you like the smell of leather, if you like boots, it's a great place to go and check out. They also have lots of impact play gear and rope, and also when I was there, I ran into Pup Amp, so I got to say hi to him, and I got to just kind of see what was new and what was going on. I've sort of more been in a position the last like 6 months or so when I haven't really been buying as much kink gear as maybe I have previously in, other years of my kink journey, simply because I'm really happy with the selection that we have right now, and there's nothing else that I really need for my collection, but I did get one thing that was quite cute. I got this little leather flower boutonnet, I think is how it's pronounced. I don't know, correct me in the comment section, I guess, if I'm wrong. And they had this, they also had it in leather pride colors, and then they also had it in black and red, and I think just red as well for the flowers. So we got that, which was super cute. And then Mr. Tex as well, he got some leather conditioner for his boots, and then also a new pair of bootlaces. So we just checked that out really quickly. We did not stop by Cookie Leather or Leather Etc., which is basically on the direct diagonal of the street from Mr. S Leather. I've gone there before. I've gotten a skirt there before. I have gotten a like posture collar there before, and I thought the quality was fine, but I didn't really feel the need to go back. I had already kind of tried everything on that was in that store, and from what I could tell, they didn't really seem to have anything new. So we skipped over that this year, although if you're looking at leather items, they do have a lot more selection for women's clothing compared to Mr. S. Now, I don't want to hold anybody in suspense for too much longer, so let's get into actually talking about the fair itself, since we are moving on to Sunday. Now, Sunday, everything starts at about 11, and generally, I try to get places as early as possible when it comes to big events like this, because as the day goes on, it's going to get busier and busier because there are more and more events at night, and it is definitely a night-focused event. However, that's not really the environment that I personally like, so I try to get there as soon as I possibly can. I think we end up showing up about noon, and for my outfit this year, I don't know if I can post photos of it. If I find anything that's like suitable for YouTube, I'll put like a photo up here. But essentially, I have on my leather skirt, I have on a bodysuit that I got from Honey Burdette, I have my leather jacket, and then I have on actually the posture collar that I mentioned from Cookie Leather. I was wearing that as well, that has like a big zip in the front here, so it's a posture collar. And then with that, I am wearing some leather garters that I got from Stockholm's Child on Etsy, and then I have a pair of my 8-inch platform pleaser heels, because I guess I like making myself suffer when I rock around in public for 4 hours. So I had on this really ridiculous outfit that I was like quite proud of, because I basically didn't really come up with an outfit ahead of time. I just like brought pieces and was like, I'll figure it out when I get there, because that's how I usually plan on packing things. I was really glad that I brought the leather jacket, because this year was actually colder and windier by a mile compared to last year. And if you are there are a few things I recommend, which would be prepared for sun and be prepared for wind, because either one could happen just depending on how things swing that particular day. I'm somebody who hates cold, so if I didn't have that leather jacket, I probably would have been absolutely miserable the entire time I was there. And that really saved my butt, and it also was a cute part of the look. It also can get very sunny though, it can get quite hot, so make sure you're wearing layers so you can cover yourself up when you're walking around in public, and so you can keep yourself warm, but also so you can take layers off in case you get overheated, so you're not dying of heat stroke because you're wearing like 20 pounds of leather clothing. Sunscreen is also very important. Water is very important. They do have refill stations for both of those throughout the event, so please don't risk heat stroke. Keep yourself protected, keep yourself cool, because it can definitely be unexpected, and you can think, oh, 10 a.m., it's 60 degrees outside, this is going to be great, and then by 1 o'clock, it could be 80 degrees outside, so just be prepared for anything, I guess, is what I would say. We got there probably about half an hour later than we did last year. So last year, I think we got there either right at 11 or a little bit after, and we got basically right in. It was like almost empty. When we got there at noon, there was already a full line wrapped around almost a block trying to get in. Now, it is donations based, so it's not like you have to pay for a ticket, and that makes the process a little bit faster. But at the same time, they also had to do a bag check, so if you had a bag, they had to check it, which really slowed everything down. If you didn't bring a bag, that did make a much shorter line. They had separate lines for each one. So if you don't have to bring a full bag with you, I'd recommend it, because it's going to be so much quicker. But even though we were in line, I think it took maybe 5 minutes to get all the way through, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But I did notice that it was much busier at noon than it was even showing up, a half hour, 45 minutes early than that the year before. When we walked in, there was definitely a few things that I noticed that were different. Like, the layout was generally the same, but the vendors were different. And actually, one of the very first places we stopped at was this leather shop, and I will put a picture of their Etsy and their like Instagram and stuff so you can see what I'm talking about. And they were so cool. I was so glad that we stopped by here first, because I again, like I said earlier, I wasn't really looking for anything in particular when it came to my collection. I am pretty satisfied with everything that we have right now, but they had a leather puppy face hood muzzle thing, and it's like the exact thing I've been looking for I don't know, since I've been into pet play, always kind of hoping I could find one, but like I wasn't sure about the fit, I wasn't sure if it would be comfortable, and I got to actually try one on when I was there, and it was so comfortable, it fit perfectly. There was a little spot like right on the nose that kind of rubbed where there was an eyelet, but with a little bit of foam tape underneath that, I think it's going to be super comfortable. We didn't end up buying one when we were there, because I wanted one that had silver or nickel findings on it rather than brass. So we had to order one from their Etsy, and it's going to be done, I think, in mid-November. So it's going to be about 6 weeks from the time when Folsom happened until we're actually going to get it. But the wait is worth it because it did look like they were very high quality. They had so many different options for harnesses, and I also really loved that their models and who they had actually wearing the gear was quite diverse. It wasn't just something where it was like, oh, the same body type over and over and over again, and this is one size fits all. Like, they were able to do custom sizing. They were able to do everything from, like, I think an extra small maybe up to an extra large, and even things that were only like custom fit, like for example like a leather bra harness, which I'm totally saving up for. So if you have been looking for leather harness designs and you haven't found something that you've quite fallen in love yet, I would highly recommend checking them out because they also do custom orders, and I really liked it. It was one of my favorite things that we went to, and it was like the first thing that we saw. Now, generally how the layout of Folsom works is it's like several blocks that are all kind of lined up down in a straight line, and then there's kind of branches off from that going out into the other blocks. And generally the main vendor area is going down that middle straight shot, and then the sides are where there are performances and food and things like that. So it's kind of like the main vendor area and then little offshoots from there, and there's like, again, a whole map. You can see exactly how everything was laid out. And generally my technique for going through Folsom is to basically go up the street on one side, go around and go down the other way, and then when I see something interesting, kind of going to one side or the other. As we were walking through the vendor areas, there was kind of the usual mishmash of things that I expect to see at kink events. So there were more harnesses, there was floggers, there were gags, impact gear, masks, t-shirts. There was somebody who was selling like fans that had all these like funny phrases on them. There were people who had art and collectibles. There were even people there that like weren't explicitly selling kink things, which I thought was kind of weird. Like there was like somebody who was selling like just silver rings and like just like big tie-dye blankets, and I was like, okay, I guess if they're helping raising money for charity, I'm not gonna poo-poo it. It seems like an interesting thing to have at a kink event. There were clothing designers there as well. And when we were walking along, we also made sure to stop by the boot blacking station, which I don't think we stopped by last year. And actually, we know the person who was volunteering at that boot blacking station, or one of them at least. So it was nice to get to see them. And Mr. Tex had actually recently gotten a pair of boots that were custom made from Westco Boots that are located just outside of Portland, Oregon. And so they got to have their first clean and shine ever. They look really good. They did a fantastic job. So if you have any leather gear that you've wanted to learn how to take care of, or you needed somebody to clean a vest or boots or anything like that, anything that's leather, they can take care of it for you. And I think it was like 20 or 25 bucks, which if you are paying somebody to help you take care of like $200 custom boots, it's totally worth it. And it's also a really integral part of many elements of the kink community. Now, as I'm walking around, I start to notice something that keeps striking me as different from last year. So like I already mentioned, last year I remember people being very proactive with asking for pictures, and I think this year I only had one person ask I had one person I said yes to, and then I had two people besides that I said no to. But that doesn't mean that people weren't taking pictures. It just meant that they weren't asking. Now, I do take pictures when I'm at Folsom, but I don't take pictures of people. I take pictures of like, oh, that's a cool gag that I want from the shop, or I want to take a picture of this business card, or like something that is not involving any other people whatsoever. It's just me and like a cool thing that I want to buy, or something else like that. So it's not anything where any people are in the background, but for some reason this year, it seemed like there were a lot of people that were not asking permission to take photos. And I think in general at this event, I think sometimes like vanilla tourists kind of get a bad rap. I know that I've talked about them before, but it wasn't just people who seemed like they were vanilla. Like the very first thing when I walked into the event that I saw was an older man sitting on a blanket on the sidewalk, stark naked, with a half erect penis, taking a video like this of everybody who walked by. And I'm like, I'm sorry, am I in this man's private porno now? This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for a good time with my friends and not to be part of another person's personal spank bank. I mean, I don't know if that's what he was using it for, but the context of his posture and what he was doing at the event sure made it seem like there was something weird going on with that he was doing. So that was the first thing I noticed. And then throughout the event, I also saw a lot of people wearing like GoPros, and I saw people with their cell phones out just like taking photos and videos of everybody that they saw, and like I definitely saw other people asking permission for things, but it didn't seem to be as prevalent at it as it did in years past, and that was very disheartening for me, because that was one of the things that I felt the most comfortable with when it came to going to Folsom last year. Is I was like, oh, okay, everyone here has a really robust notion of consent. They understand that just because you are in a public place that you don't necessarily want to be on somebody's like Facebook feed or sold in a print of a photo for like $200 without their permission. Like, that's the kind of thing that I think about with this, because you don't know who is at the Folsom event. You could have somebody who's in witness protection. You could have somebody who is trying to not have a stalker on Facebook find them. Like, you don't know what people's histories are, and so it can be quite rude, I think, to just take somebody's photo, just assume that they're going to be okay with it because they're in a public place. Like, that's just, it's very weird to me, and that was something that I found a little bit disconcerting. Now, on the opposite side of that, I did get to meet a lot of you guys at this event as well. Now, last year, I got to go with my friend Brittany Simon, as well as our friend Kayla, and we all got to stick together as a big group. This year, Brittany wasn't able to make it, and then Kayla was kind of off doing her own thing, so I was kind of more by myself with Mr. Tex. So we were definitely not as much of a presence as maybe we were last year. So I didn't meet as many of you this year, although I was definitely at the event for less time this year, and I also wasn't with as big a group of people. So I don't know, I still got to say hi to a couple of you, which is really cool. And in the future, if you guys do see me at events, because I am going to be at a couple in the near future, always feel free to say hi. Like, you know, as long as you're not secretly live streaming me on Facebook, like, you know, feel free to say hi, feel free to like come up and talk to me. Like, that's one of my favorite things about getting to go to these events, is I get to have that one-on-one conversation time with y'all who maybe been watching me for years and who really enjoy my content. So just throwing that out there. I did get to meet some of you guys, but it was definitely very different from last year, where it felt like every 5 feet was somebody like, oh my gosh, hi Brittany, oh my gosh, hi Evie, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. Like, it felt like it was a lot more people I got to meet last year compared to this year, and I'm not really sure why that is, so it's just sort of interesting to think about. Now, when we were walking through, there were a couple of big events that happened during Folsom. Like, there's musical acts, like I mentioned. There are also performances, so people like Shaves and Fados were there doing a self-suspension. There is also a big pony play meetup, so if you want to see pony players, if you want to see people pull carts, it's great. You get to see all of their wonderful costumes. And I know Pony Tromper was there, who, if you remember, I did an interview with a couple weeks back. I know we just must have missed each other, because I went looking for the ponies this year and I couldn't find them, which was really sad, because I was like, I want to meet the ponies. I want to meet them. But 250,000 people, what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to be able to meet everybody that you want to. You're not going to be able to see everything that you want to. It's just about being able to enjoy the experience. Now, there were also some performances, like I've mentioned, that were not just pony players. There were also people doing bondage and impact play, and they also did have open furniture for play and demonstrations as well. Now, because the weather was colder than it was last year, and most people were reluctant to go totally naked, or at least didn't want to play at the same time, it was a lot easier to get in and do things while you were at the event. Now, I personally was not really in a play mood that day. I just wanted to like dress up and have fun and like go and see things. Like, I mean, I am not against public play, like in a consensual space. Like, I enjoy it, but it wasn't really necessarily the headspace that I was in when we were at Folsom this year. So instead, we just kind of kept walking and observing and checking out different vendors and saying hi to people and enjoying the weather. And actually, the only piece of gear that I ended up getting when I was there was this t-shirt. So this is actually from Folsom Street Fair. This is something that we got from their official gear booth. And this is so cool. I love this like t-shirt so much. Like, it's very like cyberpunk, Catwoman, I don't even know. Like, I actually wore this out to the grocery store the other day, and the person was like, oh, your t-shirt's so cool, where's that from? And then I was like, it was from San Francisco. And we're like, oh cool, what are we doing in San Francisco? Oh, it's Folsom. Oh, what's that? Oh, it's and it's a fair for alternative relationships. And they were like, oh, I don't really know what that means, but okay. It was like the single most awkward interaction I've ever experienced with somebody trying to describe a kink thing that I'm currently wearing. But you know, that's life sometimes. That's life sometimes. Now, when we were going back around the main loop, going and checking out the other side of the vendor fair, we decided to change into something that was more overtly kink. So I ended up taking off my skirt and I was wearing a chastity belt on a leash, which I think is, I've worn it at home before, but that might have been my first time actually wearing it at an event. And I actually have a whole review of that on my Patreon because that cannot go on YouTube for obvious reasons. But that is something that I've never really worn in public before. I find that it can kind of chafe on sort of the inner part of the legs because the leather hasn't really been fully worn in yet because it's quite thick. But it was like surprisingly comfortable, like all things considered. And I mean, honestly, I was probably more self-conscious about it than I think anybody really noticed because there were so many people wearing so many different outfits of all sorts of different kinds. I don't really remember seeing a lot of other people there who were like female presenting that were wearing a lot of bondage gear. It tended to be more of the men, and like the women were kind of wearing like maybe more non-bondage related outfits. I did see more littles this year. I think Tykables also had a booth there this year as well. So if you're a little, like this is also definitely an event for you as well. Like it's not just gay men, it's not just leather people. There's a little bit of everything. Like, there's ponies, there's pet players, there's a whole mosh pit area where you can go and play with like 30 different puppies all at once. It's great. But there were also definitely littles there as well. There were definitely also more female pets. So I like to get to see that, you know, as the years are going on with Folsom, we are getting more and more aspects of our community integrated into this event where they all truly feel like they're welcome and you all get to kind of share in that pride experience. But along with it as well, as you are getting more and more openness with the group, you also have more and more tourists. Now, I mentioned this in the video that I did last year about this, but there are tourists, there are people who are vanilla that know about the event. Like actually when we were on the way there was somebody who was like outside a cafe on one of the blocks leading to Folsom, and I overheard part of their conversation, and it was like, oh hey man, what's going on tonight? What is up with all these people? Oh, you know, it's Folsom. Oh, what's that? I've never been. Oh, you know, it's a sex and bondage thing. And like the fact that the person just like put it out there was super casually was like so funny to me because that's just like a basic way of understanding it, and they're not necessarily like wrong, but it's funny to like see people synthesize it in that way, I guess, because you know, as I'm walking by like clad in like all leather like 8-inch boots, is like this person goes, oh yeah, you know, sex and bondage, you know, just check it out. And there's definitely people who go there that are not overtly dressed kinky, who are probably kinky themselves, but maybe don't feel comfortable expressing it in that way. Maybe they don't own anything that's like super overtly kinky, or maybe they don't like dressing up or whatever else. So I don't want to assign labels like everybody who's not dressed the part isn't kinky, because that's not fair. But there are definitely people who like don't know what's going on and are just like, what's this? What's that? What's that? What are you doing? What's that over there? Who am I? Like, people who are just, they don't know what's up or down. They don't know what they're looking at. And, you know, part of me is like, oh, it's great that people are being exposed to this and getting to see what real kink looks like, as opposed to porn or movies or anything else where they maybe are getting possibly false ideas about what all of this means. So that's actually a positive thing, I think, as well, as long as they are knowing how to be respectful to the kinky people that are there, because that's always my main concern. And I didn't really notice anything that I thought was like bad behavior on their part. It was just sort of like the weird feeling of being oogled by people who are there at the modern day freak show circus and not really being sure if it's totally a positive, because as well there are people there who are photographers who make money selling these photos of all these weird people. There are also people that are there simply to purely spectate, not to learn or explore anything. Just like, oh, haha, look at these weird people. And then you have the people who are there to proselytize. Oh, I definitely did not notice that my first year at all. But there was an entire booth that was dedicated to talking about circumcision. And then there was also definitely people, like, there were people walking around. There was somebody who had this shirt, and I definitely remember it just said, "Y'all need Jesus" on it, and I was like, talking about me? I need Jesus? Okay. Yeah, so there were definitely people who were there who were kind of like hate participating. I mean, if they donated to get in, they were still giving money to an AIDS charity, so like, I don't know what to tell them. I don't know if they actually reached out to anybody, but that's what I find is so interesting is like, what are these people like, do they truly think they're accomplishing anything by being here? Are they just like, oh, I'm fighting a good fight for Jesus? Like, it's very weird. Luckily, they were not too obnoxious about it. It wasn't like they were getting into anybody's faces or forcing pamphlets in anybody's hands, anything like that, but it was just sort of like, huh, did not notice that last year, but clearly there are people who go to these types of events that are there purely to try and like convert people and like save them from their gayness and like all those other sorts of things. And you know, it's something that happens if you're at a public event. Like, if you're walking around an airport, you're going to run into Jehovah's Witnesses. You're going to run into people who are trying to sell you a religion or sell you supplements or something else, and it's no really different from any other space. It's a very weird juxtaposition between like leather gay pride and then also y'all need Jesus. It's a very, very weird experience to have that sort of dichotomy. And it was also really interesting because two booths around on the back side of that, you know, in general, because I am there in the earlier part of the day, I don't really see a lot of maybe the more extreme stuff that happens, but I did see somebody who is having pee go into their vagina. So I saw that. Never thought I would see that in real life because water sports is definitely not allowed at any of the dungeons I go to. But yeah, that was the thing that happened. And as we kept looping around, it got later and later in the day, and it kept getting slower and slower and slower to get through things. And I ran into a couple of other people that I know, and I saw Cat Black. I did not say hi though. You were watching this, Cat. Hi, I saw you twice. And I didn't say hi because you were in the middle of a conversation. But I did run into a couple of people, but then it started to just get busier and busier and busier, and it became such a slog to get through things. And what I have found is the magic pumpkin hour time is 2 o'clock. Like, you want to be heading out by 2 o'clock. If you don't want to deal with crowds, 2 o'clock is the magic hour. Because about 2:30, it becomes like being in molasses, and it is going to take you twice as long to get through on the opposite side of the street as it did the first time, particularly because we were taking the long route out. There are multiple entrances and exits out of Folsom, but the way that we wanted to go that would take us most directly to where we were staying was on the long side, so we kept going that way, and we also wanted to make sure that we got to see all of the shops. Now, from there wasn't really anything in particular to write home about. Like, there was a big music performance that was going on. There were definitely more people drinking alcohol, so if that's a concern for you, something to be aware of. There were also people playing a giant narrated version of Twister, which is the most kink-friendly board game. So I'm not sure why I was surprised to see that, because I wasn't. But it reminded me of like going to a gaming convention where like you're just walking by and like there's a narrator who is very excitedly saying like everything that every player is doing, and you have no idea what it is that they're playing, and you're like, what is even going on? But like everybody seems so excited about this because there were so many people watching that kinky Twister game. Let me tell you, people were invested in it. And that was basically my Folsom. I mean, I think Folsom gets a lot of hype for being this like super amazing, eye-opening event, but as somebody who lives and breathes, like, you know, my whole life, my whole job in the kink world, it's maybe not as exciting as it is for somebody who doesn't get to do that on a daily basis. Like, I can see that if you were doing this as like a first kink experience, or maybe you don't really get to go out in your local community, or this is your first time really exploring it, whatever else, like I can see this being really exciting, being a revelation in terms of, wow, look at all of these people that are also doing kink, and look at all these cool places and shops I've never seen, selling things I've never seen before, and all these performances, and like everybody is so proud, and like I think that can be an amazing thing for people to have. But now that I've been going to kink conventions for years, and I've been going to events for years, I don't want to say it's part of my everyday necessarily, but it's something where it's not like jaw-dropping, like, wow, this is amazing. Will I continue going to Folsom? Absolutely. Do I recommend wearing 8-inch platform heels for 4 hours? I do not, but I did it and I survived, and I only took them off and put on my tennis shoes as we were leaving the event, so I conquered those platform heels. I absolutely did. So I survived. I thought it was a fun time. I think next year, when I do this again, I want to make sure that I'm more organized about it, because I would love to actually make sure I meet up with more people, and I'd like to go to more events. And again, like I mentioned, there are a lot of other things, like there are classes, and there are rope bondage jams, and munches, and parties, and after parties, and exclusive VIP club lounges, and everything else. And that was not really something that we participated in, because we wanted a little bit more of like a restorative travel experience, I guess you could say, rather than like exhausting ourselves for an entire week afterwards, which is, you know, another valid option, but not the one that we wanted to pick for ourselves this year. But point being, there are lots of options when it comes to Folsom. It is something that is very welcoming. If you are nervous about going to Folsom because you're not sure that you're going to see people that are your body type or your age or your size or anything else, like, you will see a little bit of everybody at Folsom. Same as any other kink convention. You will see people who are old, people who are young, people who are skinny, people who are fit, people who are not. You will see people of all sorts of different backgrounds and ethnicities and different kinks and different role play outfits and different gender identities and everything. Like, you will see a little bit of everything at Folsom, and that is something that makes it so beautiful. So anyways, that's my story of my experience at Folsom. Hopefully you found this interesting and helpful. If you haven't already and you want to see more, please do subscribe and make videos twice a week. And if you want to, if you really enjoyed this, if you want to see some of my exclusive content, please consider supporting me on Patreon. That is what makes this channel possible. I have photo shoots and bonus videos, lots of cool things, a Discord chat. And if you do already support me on Patreon, thank you so, so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.